Welcome back, everyone. Today I'm going to talk about my top 5 favorite things about my 2003 Mitsubishi Montero that come from the factory. So if you haven't seen my last video, I did my top 5 favorite modifications that I've done to the car to make it better for off-roading and camping and that kind of thing. But a lot of people ask about this platform, the Gen 3, which is 2001 to 2006 for the US buyers. They ask, is this a good platform to start with? And I think there's a lot of things that the Mitsubishi Montero has going for it from the factory that are worth considering if you're looking to get into this car. So today I'm going to talk about those top 5 favorite things that I enjoy with this, just the way it comes, OEM from the factory, without doing any other modifications for it, so that if you guys are considering buying one of these or looking into this platform, you have an idea of what's good about it from the start. So let's get into it. All right, the first thing that I really like about this car is the size. Now, in the United States, we have tons of huge SUVs. A lot of the American-made cars are so big that you can't wheel them. A lot of the trucks are so big, it's really hard to get them out. Like the full-size pickups and the full-size SUVs are just too big. That's why the Tacoma and smaller vehicles are so popular. And the Montero has a great wheelbase. And so what I really like about it is it's almost exactly 110 inches from wheel to wheel. And what that means is it's really set up well to crawl over things, and it's got great approach angle. Now, we'll talk about the departure angle and how I don't love that as much. But if you look at the approach angle, and I have a custom bumper on here, but in factory form, it comes out just a little bit further. The wheels are almost the very first thing to hit. And so if you look at it really from here, you can see how close the wheels are to the front. And that means I can go pretty much up to a 45-degree angle, hit it, and just start climbing straight up. And so that's really great when you're off-roading. That approach angle gives you a lot of confidence to just start climbing things. You're not hung up on the bumper or bumping into a rock and having to push through it if you're trying to climb up something. And so I really appreciate that. And then the wheelbase is great because you don't get hung up underneath things. You don't get high centered on the undercarriage. But it's long enough that it gives you a lot of stability. And so that's probably the first thing I like about it. I really like the dimensions of it. As far as like interior space, it feels like a spacious vehicle, but it still fits really well on narrow trails, and you don't feel like you're driving this whale as you go down more narrow or technical sections. So that's the first thing I really like about this from the factory, is just the way it's set up in the dimensions. The next thing I really like about this car is actually the spare tire location. And if you're new to off-roading, or if you've never tried to fit bigger tires, you might think, okay, what the heck? It's just a tire on the back, no big deal. But the reality is when you go to bigger tires, so these are 33s, a lot of times the place where they put the spare tire from the factory no longer fits your spare. And so that's why you see guys doing really expensive swing out bumpers, or you see them stashing a tire on the roof rack, which you should almost never do because of how heavy it is up there, or they have to sacrifice precious internal space to put their spare tire. And so what I love about the Montero is because it's already mounted on the door, because the door hinges from the factory are meant to carry so much weight back here, you can throw a 33, a 35, you could probably even fit a 37 back here without any issues. All you have to do is modify this tire carrier. So I love that for that reason, that you can fit bigger tires, because wow, it saves you a ton of money. And honestly, I think it looks cool, and it's way easier to get to your spare tire from here. So it's one of the things that you wouldn't really think about, but from the factory, having a spare tire up there is pretty rare these days. A lot of guys aren't doing it. And to have it on the Montero, just the way it comes, that's a pretty rad feature. I think there's another thing that's hard to show, but is very evident on the Montero, and that's that these are so incredibly overbuilt. It's one of the things that you don't think about when you think about something that has 4-wheel drive and it's got high ground clearance. You never really wonder, hey, how are the components going to hold up, until you get into a really tricky obstacle or you blow something up. Now, I've got a lot of friends with Toyotas. I got a lot of people who really love them, who really use the platform, everything from old Tacos all the way up to new Land Cruisers, and they are really well built, I'll say that. But I've had a lot of people blow up a lot of parts on Toyotas, and I am not making any claims that the Montero is better than that, but it really shows you can have an off-road capable vehicle, but if you don't have the parts to back it up, it really doesn't work for you. So let me just give you a couple examples. If you look down here, you get an idea, because I have all my suspension showing. These are some pretty beefy components that go into this. They didn't slouch on this. This wasn't built the cheapest way possible to just get them out the door. This was built really rugged. It's got big, thick sway bars. The CV axles are good. The lower control arms are substantial, and they really hold up to a beating. The frame on this is a unibody, which is weird for an off-roader, but it's made of 1/8-inch thick folded steel, and so it really holds up well. It doesn't flex at all. And you can see here, where the rear diff is. You can see these huge springs in the back to hold up the weight, the enormous CV axles. But I think one of the best ways to demonstrate this is actually some of the stuff you can't see. So for example, here's the ring gear out of this Montero. When I did the re-gear, I kept this. This is my old ring gear. Look at how thick this is. If you're familiar with diffs, you know that this is really beefy. This is a 9.5-inch ring gear, and it's equivalent about to a Dana 60, which means you could run 37-inch tires on this from the factory, and it probably wouldn't complain. Now, the CV axles in the front, they are gonna show some weakness. 37s are huge, but what I'm trying to say is the internals really hold up well. I've seen a lot of rigs doing a lot of crazier things with a lot smaller diffs, and I've never actually heard of one of these diffs exploding or going bad. And so that just goes to show these things are really, really hardy inside and out. They're built really tough. They've taken way more abuse than I'm willing to keep throwing at it, and they just keep going. And so it's really nice to know when you buy one of these, you don't have to buy it and then immediately start chucking aftermarket and expensive parts at it to get it up to the point where it can perform. You can honestly slap 33s on a Montero totally stock and run it, and it's gonna handle it just fine, and it's gonna keep up with a lot of other cars. And so that's super cool, because I know a lot of other cars, when you start getting into bigger tires and more hardcore off-roading, they just start to disintegrate. And that's not true about the Monteros. This one included, even though this one looks like a softer version versus the Gen 2 and the Gen 1. All right, the next thing I want to talk about is hard to explain, but once you're in the car, it makes a lot of sense. And that's traction control. That's got to be one of my favorite features of this car. And I'm going to insert some videos here, hopefully showing you guys what that looks like for off-roading on the trail. But this is basically like A-Track. If you're familiar with A-Track in a Toyota, it's just like that. It's just a very primitive version of it because it came out in 2003. So this is only for the 2003 to 2006 models in the United States. So if you have an 01 or 02, you do not have traction control. And I think that's a huge bummer and a great reason to buy an 03 through 06, because traction control is a really amazing feature. So what I've done here is I've actually parked on some ice. And I've got it in first gear, and I'm gonna gun it, and I'm gonna hope that those lights show up to show you what traction control looks like. Yep, right there. So that flashing light right there, what that means, let's see if I can do it again and not get into traffic. You can see those rear wheels are flashing. And so what that means is that there's a ABS module that is sensing which tire is spinning inside of the car. And when those lights come on, they are telling you which tires are slipping, and it's applying brakes to the opposite wheel to transfer the power. Now, that might be really confusing if you're not familiar with open differentials, and if I would encourage you to look up some videos on that are going to explain it way better than me. But basically what that does is it allows your wheels, whichever wheel has got traction, it allows it to be the one that is going to be getting the power. And so if you're looking here, if this rear wheel is on ice and it's spinning, this system will apply the brakes in here and transfer that power to the other side. And what this functionally does is it kind of acts like a locker. And it allows you to have both wheels spinning instead of just one. If you've ever been twisted up on the trail and you've had one tire up in the air, you know it's spinning around and the tire that's on the ground doesn't go anywhere. This allows you to transfer that power over to the other wheel. It allows you to crawl up obstacles even if you lift a tire off the ground. Honestly, it makes you just look like a way better driver than you are. It gives you a lot more confidence on trails where things are slippery or you might be tilting up, because you can keep that power, you can keep it going through there. And I'm probably going to do a whole video on traction control and traction control versus stability control, which is a whole different topic, because it's confusing for people. I think it's important to know how to use it, what's actually happening in the car, and how to maximize its potential in your off-road experience and not also wear it out. So that's something I really like about this. I don't think it's as good as a locker. I think it leaves a lot to be desired when you're really pushing it, when you're really crawling in the rocks. And it'd be nice if it wasn't electronic, in the sense that it's computer operated versus a mechanical pin that slides over and locks your axles together. But for a straight off the showroom floor, like out of the box thing to have, man, this will give you so much confidence off-road. It'll allow you to get out and enjoy it without getting stuck all the time. And then you don't have to throw, I don't know, $2 or $3 grand at lockers right away just to feel like you can start pushing the vehicle. This thing will get just as far as my friends that are locked in most cases and case scenarios. There's a few areas where it lacks, but like I said, for coming straight from Mitsubishi like this, that's probably my #1 favorite thing about this car. All right, last but certainly not least in my list of things that come with the 2003 Mitsubishi from the factory is actually the community. And I know this is a little weird one, but it's worth noting because the car community is such a cool community. There's everything you can imagine in the car community. You know, whatever kind of style you're into, there's a lot of groups. And if you've been part of a car community group, you know that sometimes they can kind of suck. The car can be awesome, but the group that you're a part of just isn't, it's not the right vibe for you, or they're not very helpful, or they're snarky, or it's just a bunch of people who spend a lot of money. And the Montero community is so different. There's a Facebook group with about 7,000 people here in the US, and it is amazing. The Instagram community is incredible, and there's lots of companies that are specifically making parts for Monteros, or they're working at keeping these things alive, that really change the game. And so I can't imagine owning a Montero, and I actually own 3 of them, which I'm going to introduce to you guys later, but I can't imagine owning this Montero without the community. Like the ability to find parts and troubleshoot things, these guys are so helpful and so cool. And if you're coming from a stock point of view, if you just bought one of these and you're looking to modify it or just maintain it, having a strong community around you is so helpful. Maybe I'll tell my story a little later on in this channel as we start to, like, you know, get into some of the more details of my life. But I started with this car almost knowing nothing about cars, and now I'm a pretty proficient self-made mechanic at home, at least for my projects. A lot of the reasons because of this group. Like, they've just helped me through stuff. They helped me diagnose things when I am looking for modifications or whatever. They've been there to help. And so if you guys aren't a part of the Instagram community, if you're not on that Facebook group, Mitsubishi Montero USA Facebook group, it has been the best hands down resource for me as I've been figuring all this out about the cars. It's been so cool to be part of a community that also supports you in what you're doing. And it's been super fun. I've made friends all across the country because of this group. I got friends all over the States, and every once in a while I get to drive out and meet them and show up in my Montero, and we get to talk shop. It's super cool. So I know that's not really about the car, but like I said, if you guys have been in the car community, you know how valuable it is to have a group of people around you that support you. And so I'm hoping that this video is honestly a part of that, a part of helping people grow in their Montero ownership. But if you guys haven't checked that out, I would highly recommend it, because that's the last thing I really love about this car. All right, guys, so there you go. There are my top 5 favorite things that I love about this car from the factory. I spent a lot of time in this car stock before I started modifying it, and it was so good stock, that's why I decided to build it. So hopefully you found this helpful. If you have a 2003 or Gen 3 Montero and there's things that you love about it, post them down below. I'd love to hear your thoughts as well. But stay tuned, because the next video I'm going to put out is my least top 5 favorite things, the worst 5 things that I think about this car from the factory. Things that are they're either still bugging me, or I worked really hard to fix them when I got it. So there's a lot of good to be said, but don't worry, there's also some other things that I wish were different. So stay tuned for that video, and I'll catch you on the next one.